Hello and welcome to the Dire Gentleman channel. My name is Gus Zagarella.
And my name is Henry Galley, and this is our show, Two Professional Writers, where Gus and I, a pair of writers who get paid for it, talk about tips, usually ones about writing, and usually ones from other professional writers. But today, we're talking about the tips from you scrubs.
Y'all thought you were safe. Y'all thought you were off the hook, huh? Not yet. Not in my house.
You may have foolishly thought that because you're our fans and because we benefit rather from your views and likes and comments, that we'd maybe go in with a bit of a tenderer touch than we typically do. But no, today we are giving you the full Chuck Wendig, prepared to have your sense of self-worth utterly annihilated.
And as always, we are in the utmost good faith if you agree with us, and the utmost bad faith if you disagree.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
So, our first tip of the day is from Ravioli.
Ah, a pasta. Interesting.
A paisan. Ravioli's tip is, Ben said, but make sure your characters aren't just saying or doing exactly what you would say or do in that situation. Give your characters unique voices and principles, instead of having them just be extensions of your own logic. Table reads and brainstorm with friends.
Yep, nope, I agree with all those, but I will say, it's totally okay to have one of your characters talk like you and have your own logic, as long as it isn't all of them.
Yeah, I think what I like to do is take, different elements of my personality, my logic, my, reasoning, my principles, and then just kind of, spread them out throughout the cast. Have characters have one of my traits, but crucially lack another that is present in a different character.
Yeah, no, it's true. It can be useful to just kind of spread things thin so you're not plagiarizing your own mind or the holistic existences of others. So yeah, I co-sign that.
I just wanted to end with a quote from Gen Urobuchi, because when he was writing Madoka Magica, he said, yeah, maybe. I've seen an anime or two, whatever. Gen Urobuchi, he's a really good writer. I'm a fan of a lot of his stuff. He said when he was writing the character of Kaname Madoka, who is the main character of Madoka Magica, that she didn't really come from him, so it was difficult to write her, because there was nothing of himself in her. And I think sometimes, in order to really test your range, you've got to write characters like that, who are just wholly alien to you.
Yeah, definitely, especially if you suck.
Exactly, right? If you're a loser who sucks and
you're some fucking boring douchebag, you gotta go for someone interesting. Push the boat out.
If all you do is play Minecraft all day and eat popsicles, maybe you should write somebody who, gets bitches.
I don't know why we decided we're just gonna be so antagonistic in this one, but I'm liking it.
Yeah, Ravioli, it was a good tip.
Ravioli, give me the fuck off Oli. Next one.
So, next up from Chris Lucier.
Chris Lucier. Vaguely familiar. That guy might owe me money. Alright, what is it?
People want to help, whether that means you need time alone to write, or you need others to bounce ideas off of. Find a community that will support you and your ambitions with encouragement and tough love.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, but I think I would also go for the other end of this, which is, don't be a dick to people. I think it's so important to remember, because this is something that I really reckoned with this year, and have tried my best to kind of work against in an active way. You have to remember that, you're not the main character of life, and that your writing, as much as it feels this way to you subjectively, is not this holy thing that the universe kind of arcs towards. And obviously, yes, like Chris said, find people who are supportive, find people who will give you tough love, but you also have to reward that by reciprocating. Everyone in your life is a whole person with their own, wants and needs and hobbies and feelings. So be giving. This is good advice for writing and for life, in my opinion.
Yes, I fully agree, because as you know, Chris puts it, people want to help you. That should go both ways. You should be a person who wants to help others. Otherwise, you shouldn't expect it in return.
Exactly. Like a big thing that happened for me recently is, I have a lot of friends, not just the people who appear on this channel, who I'll like send my work to when it's done. And I just realized, man, there's a lot of times when I've expected that from them and not done the same thing. So now I really try, whenever like a friend sends me something, to really like give it the time and thought it deserves. So just make sure you're doing that same thing and you're not considering yourself like writer, main character of the universe. Everyone will get to your stuff now, you get to their stuff later.
Yeah, exactly. Find a community that will support you in your ambitions with encouragement and tough love, but also give the same in kind. I think is a good, and extends naturally from what Chris was saying. Thank you, Chris.
I agree. Thank you, Chris. Also, fuck you. Give me that money. All right. What's the next one?
Next up, we got a tip from Isaac Gooch, voice actor.
I don't know what I should.
I'm gonna Gooch.
No, this
anyway.
is no. This is a fucking like. I'm very sorry, Isaac, if this just is your real name, but this is a proper like Bart Simpson calls up Mo Sislak in The Simpsons. Is like, oh, is there a Gooch there? First name Isaac, and he's like, I suck Gooch. They won't want to know that I suck Gooch in this bar.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see. They played a pretty nice trick on us there.
Maybe, who knows? Because they have a voice actor next to it. If this is just your real name, I'm really sorry, Isaac Gooch.
Isaac Gooch VO, oh my god. So, Isaac Gooch says, if you want to hone your skills and practice writing certain styles and genres, consider writing fanfiction of something you're familiar with. Even if you don't share it, it's a useful practice medium to experiment and play around with your ideas, without being precious.
That is really good advice from Isaac Gooch. I'm so sorry. That is really good advice. Like,
I agree. We were always saying that, like, if you can get your start in fanfiction, if that's what it takes, like, you care, you're passionate about a story that already exists, nothing wrong with playing around with it and creating, like, a theoretical, your own version through writing.
Yeah, all creative work, especially early on, starts with imitation. Just make sure that you're imitating small pieces of a lot of things rather than big pieces of a few things when you're getting into your own original work.
Yeah, exactly. The fanfiction stage is for the mimicry. Once you get to a certain point where you feel confident in your own voice, that's when you start not being wholly one thing. You end up being like a kind of gestalt of all the different pieces of media you've taken in. And all the advice you've taken in. So thank you, Isaac, for joining the gestalt of our collective advice pool.
I'm really glad that we could think of it as the back of a car, and we've just added an Isaac Gooch bumper sticker.
Yeah, just think of it as the back of the Gooch.
Yeah. We're fucking children.
We're not fucking children.
No, that's Justin Roiland. I came back to him. But no, allegedly. Don't sue me.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, again, I'm really sorry. We were super like kind and tender touch in the first one, and then said to everyone in that one, "Oh yeah, no, please, give you." Did you ever see Happy Gilmore, Gus?
No, I don't watch fucking Adam Sandler movies.
Very fair, judge me. But a plot point in that movie is he leaves his like grandma at this home because he can't support her, and the like head orderly at the home is like Ben Stiller with this handlebar mustache, and he's like super nice when anyone is around. Then the second they leave, he's like forcing all the grandmas to do like hard labor for him. And that's us doing one super nice video and telling, oh yeah, send in your advice. We'll just sort of lovingly go. Then when it's through the door, we like pull out the hammers.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of,
oh yeah,
I had to leave this one in. We'll be nicer. But first, from Noma UYS, bad power scale NG is bad writing. Make sure powers and abilities are consistent, and it's not if a weaker character beats a stronger one, but how.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Now after Isaac Gooch, every single name I'm thinking, okay, what are you trying to get us to say here?
The reason I kept this in is because we have a video on this channel that gets, new comments every now and then, and it was a clip of Stan Lee that you sent to me at one point.
Yeah, that I said you really ought to re-upload this because it's Stan Lee talking about people always asked him like versus battles who would win, like Spider-Man or the Hulk, the Thing or Mr. Fantastic, whatever, all these different stuff. And his answer is just, oh, the answer is so simple. Whoever wins is whichever one the writer wants to win. And so many people in the comments are like, that's a terrible way to write. Some characters are just stronger than others. Completely, like, not understanding that Stan Lee is saying that it's all about the writer decides who should win for narrative purposes and then figures out an interesting and believable way for it to happen. Which I'm very sorry, like weird, like power scaling people who don't just do it for fun, but do in fact think that it's a good approach to writing. It isn't actually that interesting to pull out your fucking abacus and all your graphs and just think, okay, numerically, who would win this? Oh, I guess the bad guy just stomps the good guy. End of story.
Yeah, and I think in Noma's tweet that nuance is present because they end it by going, it's not if a weaker character beats a stronger one, but how. Obviously you want some level of consistency, but also you want to create a compelling conclusion to any fight. If it comes down to, you saw the stat sheet before these characters fight, and then it's an immediate, like, just everything goes according to the stat sheet, that's the equivalent of a heist movie just having them lay out the plan, and during the montage of executing the plan, they get it right. And then they just go home, and they have all the money, and no complications happen. That's not fun. That's not interesting. That's not storytelling.
I've been thinking about like fight scenes and stuff a lot lately because of a project I'm working on that you'll find out sometime about later. Um, and I just think, yeah, you just don't want your fights to play out like that kind of infamous Deadliest Warrior video game from back in the day.
Yeah,
Where basically the whole thing is it was so realistic. Basically, whoever strikes the first blow just kills the other one.
Yeah, it's almost so realistic that somebody could like sprain their ankle mid-battle and just die.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, in an abstract sense, you might think, oh, that's a bit different and interesting. But it's actually extremely tedious where you start the fight and the other guy just immediately throws a knife into your head and it's over.
Yeah, it's not exactly, it doesn't feel like a game. It doesn't really feel like, fiction. It's kind of like just like, yes, in real life, sometimes violence is pretty boring and then just results in a tragedy.
Yeah, sometimes it is just gruesome and quick. And hey, if you're trying to make that point, more power to you. But if you want something that's seen as like a fun battle thing, maybe don't just have two combatants square up, then the other just immediately like caves their head in with a mace and leave.
Exactly. Well, anyway, thank you, Noma.
Thank you, Noma.
Moving on to Isabella Malay, focus on your story and characters more than the story's message. It'll come off as preachy at best and propaganda as worst.
I don't disagree, but like, about when did people just decide that, like, theme is an enemy of story and character?
Yeah, that's the thing. Again, it's like the pyramid one we went over last time.
Yeah, it's like, I just hate having that conversation.
Yeah, you know what? You know what I was gonna say about this one is that, if your story's message is something so far away from your characters and your story, it's not the message. Get a different, better message that fits the story you're trying to tell. Like, nothing is going to just not have meaning. And the more you try to, like, be like, well, the message is this, but I'm not going to make the story about that, the more you're going to just bumble into some other unintentional message.
Yeah, that's the thing. All narratives have themes. All of them have quote-unquote messages, which, I don't even, like, unless we're making, like, fucking after-school specials about, like, not smoking and saving the environment, I don't think necessarily, like any art needs to be like didactic, but every piece of art is going to be about something, and that's what theme is. And I think I don't know. I feel like it's just a lot of YouTubers because they naturally just need to, like us, constantly churn out new content, have to create new bizarre like dichotomies and talking points, even when they don't necessarily need to exist.
I mean, I don't want to put this all on Isabella
No,
Millay.
it's not Isabella Malay. I'm sorry.
I think it's unrelated, but like The Critical Drinker, for example, constantly talks about the message. It's one of those things where the way he talks about it, it just kind of absorbs meaning. It's almost like a sponge made of dog whistles, is the best way I can put it. People who know, and people who are like, oh, The Critical Drinker's not like that.
Is that the critical drinker himself defending himself in the third person?
It's just one of those, those powerful men from like, the movies of bygone ages that he really treasures.
Sinewy, muscular, sweaty, powerful men with their muscles, and they're trying to kill each other.
While we're on the subject of this guy, I think one of my favorite things that I heard is that like he said like, oh, Western movies are falling apart because the East is releasing some really like interesting genre bending movies that like just really like break the mold. And the most recent one he could list was like the original Old Boy.
That's so. What was that? 2001.
Yeah, like dude, list Parasite at fucking least.
Anyone who thinks of the world in terms of the West and the East is a fucking idiot. Like, what
Yeah, that's
are
a
you?
wrongin'.
Like a medieval
That's a wrongin'
knight?
right there.
Yeah, no, exactly. That in itself is such a like vibe check thing. If you're out here talking about the West and the East, like as if either of those things are in any way homogenous and not a thousand smaller groups who all want to kill each other.
Yeah, like, oh, but back in my day, we would just kill the people right over the hill, because they lived there, and we lived here.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, when these people think of the East, they're generally just saying Japan. Because, like, say, Japan and China, for example, completely different cultures, completely different, like, film industries. Like, do you know that the East obviously fucking encompasses both North and South Korea, and also India and Pakistan? These groups that don't historically see quite eye to eye, to put it very, very lightly.
And also, if the West includes Europe, Europe, the famously homogenous and never warring states of, Europe.
Yeah, no, exactly. The guys who have always got along and had one culture and made one type of like movie and TV show, and I don't know. I think it's the whole thing of just wanting to make sweeping statements. Making sweeping statements are a great way to seem smart to dumb people and to seem dumb to smart people.
Oh yeah, well it's the whole thing of like, if you can give easy answers, you make it so that people don't have to do the thinking.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, they're the East and the West. They like, and that's the thing. What's so annoying as well is like generally when these guys think of the West, and it's really ironic for the critical drinker who is from Scotland, when they think of the West, they just mean like America, and specifically the United States of America.
And it's really, really funny because, like, sometimes they're like, well, America's too degenerate. We mean, like, the parts of Europe where there aren't enough brown people yet. But other times, they mean fucking Rome. They mean the West was, like, the Roman Empire. And it's like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but, Mediterranean people? Not especially white.
Yeah, and, like, the Roman Empire was spread a lot over, quote-unquote, the East as well. Again, you sound like you want to be a fucking Roman general when you think of the world. And then again, they probably do. That's not an own. These dudes so want to imagine they're like some fucking ancient Roman dude who isn't gay but hates women so much that he only fucks other dudes.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, anyway, thank you, Isabella.
Tweet, Isabella Millay.
What's next?
Next up is Sanban Apoy with those 18 plus sort of cross-out things either way.
Okay.
So Behave, Sanban.
Yeah, I hope everything you're doing is above board, Sanban, because if not, I'm gonna have to denounce and reject you.
If you're gonna write about cultures or minority groups you're not familiar with, the easiest thing you can do is talk to folks of said minority groups. Ask them what they hate seeing about themselves in media and what they prefer.
Yeah, that seems like really good advice to me.
But Henry, they live over there and we live over here.
What? You mean talk to people from the East?
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk to anyone in the general area where Fu Manchu lived in a racist comic from the 60s.
Just not the idea of, like, I cannot speak to anyone east of me. So, like, okay, north, so yeah, anyone who is, like, standing behind me at any given time, I'm like, you are the East. You stay the fuck away from me.
But Henry, I have some bad news. I can't associate with you anymore because you are to the east of me. Britain is the east.
God, imagine someone being like, I can't talk to anyone because if I go far enough east of myself, eventually I just end up at myself again. It's everyone. It's all the East.
It's true. Even I'm the east.
It was all East. Always has been.
That's the peak of Orientalism where everything is the Orient.
God. But in all seriousness, it's exactly because of thinking like that is only, I would say, slightly strong from what a lot of people actually believe, is why Sandman's advice is so good and so useful. Ultimately, I think, as long as you're doing it, like, politely and sensitively and not like a fucking alien trying to learn more about humans, I think it's generally just, as a human being, wonderful to ask about other people's cultures and backgrounds, do a little bit of cultural exchange, learn more about the world around you. Because, I think in general, if you want to be a writer, you should be very curious.
Also, if you're the type of person who's like, meh, representation is so difficult. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. I don't know whether to go, like, full stereotype or, like, do, like, a slightly more nuanced take. Either way, people get mad at me. My advice is stop being a fucking little baby wiener boy. How about stop being a little fucking baby wiener?
I think, honestly, it's one of those things that, like, it's always worth putting representation in, because it will ultimately just make your stories more interesting and have a better reflection of the real world. But at the end of the day, there is almost always gonna be someone upset at you. It's just a reality of the world. You can never please 100% of the people 100% of the time. My way of thinking about it is, if I'm gonna piss off anyone, I want it to be the people I don't respect. That's a good litmus test. Like, make your work in a way that the people who you respect are, like, nice, and the people that you don't respect are the ones who are angry about it, because who gives a fuck about what they think?
Yeah, and take it from, like, a YouTuber. Like, the thing is, if you're gonna, like, buckle at any bit of controversy, any bit of pushback, especially from people who, like, represent groups that you're trying to represent but aren't you, like, you are just not cut out for this. You cannot handle it. Maybe instead of, like, whinging about the potential controversies you should get into, you should just handle yourself with a bit more grace. Maybe you should have a bit thicker skin. Or maybe you should realize, like, okay, I'm never going to be able to handle not pleasing some of the people, so I'm just going to get out while the getting's good.
But it is that kind of Lily Orchard bullshit of, like, if you're even thinking about, like, what is my, like, YouTube apology video gonna be to the people of the world while you're writing something, you already have your, like, priorities way out of whack.
Just write the damn story and, like, listen to, like, a person. Maybe you'll learn something from them. Or listen to nobody and deal with people maybe being like, you should have listened to that person. It's not that big a deal. Just stop complaining about being canceled before you're even on air.
Yeah, it is the funniest thing about so many dudes are like, yeah, if I release my thing, I'd totally be cancelled. It's just like, who are you?
These fucking, like, micro celebrities with, like, 3 followers on Twitter who, like, I've been canceled.
No, it's so true. It's the same as a while back. What's really funny is there's a decent chance he'll be watching this, but he can't comment because we've blocked him. I'm not going to say any names because he'd just get off on that. We got a bunch of really weird comments from this just absolutely horrendous animator whose stuff just looks like this like kind of bizarre floating puppet animation with like no like weight or anything to it. And this guy got really riled up at like a lot of our stuff, and in particular a lot of the stuff that Meg said, which came from kind of weird like sexist roots. But yeah, this dude was a complete lunatic and was like always going on about like how people would feel about this and that and about how his animation would be the best. And it's just like, dude, you haven't even made and put anything out that is even worth consideration yet. Like, as we always say, the reason that Gus and I refer to ourselves as the two professional writers is not only because it's factually true, but because if you listen to our advice and think, hey, these guys are full of shit, let's see how well they could do it, you're more than welcome to. Like, for example, me and Gus and Addison and Charlie, we've all been doing work on the Mayfair Watcher Society, the official Trevor Henderson audio drama from Bloody FM, the podcast offshoot of Bloody Disgusting. You could go there, check all those out, see how we write horror. If you like fantasy, a whole season of the Kingmaker Histories that Meg has spearheaded is now out. If you can go and, see how we do that. Like, there are so many examples of our stuff just out here that you're more than welcome to look at. And if you think our advice is full of shit, well, you're more than welcome to go and look at the results of the processes that we swear by and see what you think. That's the advantage of actually making shit.
Exactly. And if you think, our actual writing and our work is full of shit, then, well, you're allowed to think that. We made it nonetheless, and we were paid for it.
And that's what matters.
We could be the least talented people in the world, but we are undeniably
We're still going to the bag. That's the whole thing. What's so funny is, like, so many, like, weird dudes, and it's always, like, weird right-wing guys get super angry about the professional writers thing. We always just simply reply, like, dude, it's just our job writing. Like, that's how we make the money. It's what's on our tax returns. And they're like, but you're not good! And we'll be like, look, we never said we were good. We don't call ourselves the two best writers in the world, react to whatever.
I'm sorry, Henry, but did you just call people right wing? You know that's a slur. If people are called right wing, people will think that the things that they believe are inherently bad or connected with some bad conservative things. Keep in mind, these would be people who might say all these things, might believe in all these things, but if you call them right wing, well, how could they live with themselves? They're going to get fired right on the spot.
And that's the difference. Fuck them. All right, what's next?
So, from Amity L. Parker, one of the best things you can do for your characters is try to give them a distinctive way of speaking, even if it's only barely distinct. If each of your characters sound like the same person, you've done something wrong. Add on. Though it might be said that there's only so far you can take this, so try not to overthink it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's good advice. I think we have some advantages in this area because a lot of what we write, whether it's like audio or like visual scripts for like animation and stuff like that, has the benefit of actors to help make each thing sound distinct. But definitely it can be really just valuable to make sure. There's that test that people always talk about that I think is a pretty good one, where it's like that you've written strong characters when you could like take a conversation between them and like white out the names and still know who's talking to who.
Yes, exactly. And I also wanted to say, like, as a thing from, like, my early screenwriting days, like, when I was sort of, like, being learned how to do the craft, we would always, be taught to, like, give your characters, like, a specific speech pattern or, like, have them, like, say a certain thing in a certain way. And I think what Amity is saying here is that, like, there's only so far you can take it. Don't overthink it. It means that, like, once you're past that page of, like, past that stage of really differentiating the characters, not every single person needs to, like, have a specific stutter or have a catchphrase or, like, talk with, like, apostrophes between every word because they've got kind of, like, a rough and tumble accent.
It's true. Like, I will admit, in a lot of times when, like, I think dialect writing is an interesting and complex thing, and I think it's It's obviously not my business to tell people what to and what not to write when they're writing their own dialect. But when you're writing other people's dialect, prepare for me personally to find it much harder to read your work.
Well, I will say this, and I won't name the script, and I won't, we'll never see it here, but I remember in high school, I wrote a script that part of the beginning of it involved an Asian cabbie, and
No!
there's a reason why I would never show that script to anyone nowadays.
Oof. Gus Zagarella, enemy of the East here.
I mean, I am the last son of the West, champion of white culture.
You are Italian.
My Italian-Irish ass is clearly the most white there ever was.
Which, by the way, not to act high and mighty about myself either, because, I'm a fucking British guy who grew up in a small town. At the end of the day, like we were saying with some of the tips earlier, this is why it's actually so incredibly useful to, keep learning and educate yourself. Because at the end of the day, the very definition of ignorance is simply not knowing things. It's not to imply that you are, I don't know, like an inherently hateful person or whatever. I think when ignorance becomes truly hateful is when the ignorance is willful. When you have the tools to know and you simply choose not to. You remain in the dark because you would prefer not to, engage with the humanity of others.
Yeah, and I think, in general, living your life, in the dark and ignorant that way is one thing, but if you want to become a writer, if you want to, do art, tell stories about people who aren't yourself, you're going to have a much, much worse time if you're not curious about other people.
Yeah, it's completely true, and if you're not respectful of other people.
It's true, it's true. It's multiple ways to just basically, art is better when it's made by a person for a person. And you need to become a more complete person in order to tell better art.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what's the next tip?
So from Mushroom Macaroni.
Delicious. They should go with ravioli.
Brainstorming ideas with friends is always great and fun, but remember to keep your own expectations and vision for what you're writing your own.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately this links back into just, know what you want and finish your work. Which is not to say you can't write things by committee, just if you want it to be just yours, then ultimately just you has got to be the one to write it when all is said and done. All right, next tip.
Next we have teleformal redirections.
Oh, my favorite Kingmaker character.
It does sound a lot like Telesphore Winterlich. It's true.
So seriously, go listen to Kingmaker. A whole season is out now, 11 episodes including the prologue. It is one of the most, fun, wild steampunk fantasy adventures with a cool magic system and all that jazz.
And it's a perfect time to catch up, too, because we're between seasons.
Exactly. Now's a good time to do it. Tell your friends.
So Teleformal Redirections says, don't be afraid to go deep down rabbit holes of style. Sometimes the best way to discover the voice of a piece is to just surrender to its vibe fully. 100% agree.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it is good in all things to be experimental, push the boat out. You will find out new things about yourself and your writing ability in the process.
Exactly. And for me personally, sometimes it's good, and you've done this too, where it's just you have a vibe you need to get out, so you write something that is so aggressively that vibe that for your next thing, you can choose, how much you want to spice up with that vibe, but you've done it to its logical extreme, so you've kind of mastered it and incorporated it into your range.
It's true. One of these for me was among our group, legendary/infamous script called Untitled Action Fantasy Project.
Which it still gives me nervous panic attacks to this day. I will say for myself, in recent years, something that actually got released is Mayfair Watcher Society. One of the episodes I wrote, Boney, is so unapologetically itself, and I would recommend anyone who has any interest in listening to Mayfair, definitely check out all the other episodes, but Boney is something that I'm so proud of. It's a love letter to the 90s, and again, it features one of the monsters of Trevor Henderson, so if you're really interested in that sort of thing, please go check that out, and support Mayfair Watcher Society in general.
You should do it. You should do it. All right, what's the next tip?
From Briar Money.
Money.
It's good to wear your influences on your sleeve. A thing wouldn't be your influence if it didn't affect and stick with you on some big level, and that's the bedrock of creativity. You can be subtle with any part of your work, just don't worry if people will notice influences. Subtweet. In my experience, people who are creative themselves and really like art love picking up on this thing. And the people who complain loudest about originality or pandering were just looking for something bland and comfortable to consume anyway. Be indulgent. Embrace cringe. An interesting one.
I recently bought a bunch of Chainsaw Man plushies. So, as Meg put it, I have joined the war on cringe on the side of cringe. Yeah, again, I think as long as you're not ripping things off, a little bit of homage can be fun, as long as the work is honest. That's what matters most.
Yeah, and I think, too, is that, like, you know, it's better to be aware of your influences and kind of, like, you know, tailor how much you put into your script rather than being unaware of your references and everybody kind of, like, seeing your ass in regards to how much you've ripped off.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, like we said earlier, the fewer things you rip off, the more egregious it will feel. If you rip off a little bit of everything, your thing will feel pretty fresh.
And if you rip off a genre that has had maybe, like, you know, a million entries in it that are all around the same tropes, and you think, well, I'm gonna do that thing the million and first time, maybe consider doing something else.
You should join our Patreon, $1 a month for over 30 hours of content. It's got us and everyone else in it, and you can understand the meaning behind what Gus said with us just repeatedly mocking a dude who we worked with briefly in the past, who we have given the alias Action Johnny.
Yes.
It's very much worth it. We reviewed Killer Bean recently, and yeah, we kind of go all in on him a little bit in that.
The next one is from Raichu, not spelled like the Pokemon, and has a strange Scooby-Doo for their icon.
It's pronounced I suck Gooch.
No, stop it.
I'm so sorry, Isaac.
This is a note to me, almost seems like. You can always edit later. The last draft is the last draft when you say it's the last draft.
Yeah, no, it's true. The thing I'm working on at the moment, I swear, I finally finished what I'm positive is the last draft of the pilot, which doesn't mean it's not going to be edited more, because it will, but, like, for me, I've really been taking the full drafting thing of a draft being, like, a totally different thing, almost. Not just, like, well, I've tuned up the spelling and tightened some lines here.
No, exactly. There's always, like, you know, something more you can do with it, with another look at the story. It's important that you finish your drafts, but, like, I guess that's what it's saying. You can always edit later, and later isn't now. Right now, edit later.
Yeah, exactly. But I would say as well, go through at least a few drafts. At some point, you gotta stop.
It's true. It's very true. You gotta, like, you know, be confident in the identity of the piece. Because at a certain point, if it just keeps becoming an entirely new thing, you might as well have just written the first draft of 100 different projects. And I speak from experience here.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, I think definitely thought-provoking advice.
So next we have Ugh.
Of course we do.
Has a little Bidu for a Tanuki or something. They also have a Ukraine flag, so represent.
Based.
Their advice is, do not fear cheesiness. The audience will appreciate honesty more than ironic jokes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Something that we've talked about a few times, that I feel like this is a weird but also appropriate place to bring this up, because this is a problem that quite a few mainstream modern action movies have, because obviously action movies, they experienced a real boom of, like, cheese in the late 80s and 90s, and I think it resulted in a lot of people feeling the need to make quite ironic action movies.
Yeah, totally.
Like, basically anything with Ryan Reynolds in it. But I think a good example that Gus and I have maybe hinted at a couple times, but I think is worth talking about now, Gus and I both absolutely despise the film Bullet Train.
Yeah, we do. Oh my god, it was a horrific experience in the theater to watch that movie.
Yeah, no, we both found it completely cringeworthy. We found the action bad. We found the idea that it set itself in Japan, but made almost all of the main characters white people, including the head of the Yakuza. It was just complete trash.
It's just a movie that thought that it could coast by on Rule of Cool, but had no idea what cool actually was. Does cool mean editing style where a lot of different cuts happen, meaning a lot happens, but not much happens in between the intercuts? Does good combat mean let's zoom in very close on the two people fighting to the point that we don't see their full arms and legs, and thus the choreography is ruined? There is maybe one sequence in that movie that is dynamic, and it's the fight with the wolf. And there is one sequence leading up to that which is interesting, and it's the backstory of the wolf. It's just such a shame. A series of contrived and lampshadingly contrived incidents that apparently said something about egoism.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of thing that I think proves why we will take something that is very, very sincere, like the movie Nobody, with Bob Odenkirk, directed by Eliana Schuler and written by Derek Kolstad of John Wick fame, over something like that.
Or hell, Killer Bean Forever.
Yeah.
Killer Bean Forever is a perfect example of something that is entirely sincere, but it's going to be cheesy because it's coffee beans. They're coffee beans in an action movie that is otherwise played completely straight. And Bullet Train is a movie that cannot help but every single second just be like it would be really dumb and cringe if we took this seriously. It can't even be funny. Eccentric people are doing action movie stuff because their eccentricity is not caring that they're in an action movie.
Which, by the way, is all the more irritating having afterwards read the original Bullet Train book, which is a Japanese book, and it's fantastic. But crucially, it's not an action movie. It's a, locked door thriller on a train, as one of the reviews pointed out.
Exactly. They had no business turning a, mostly unrelated book with more interesting iterations of the characters into a watered-down, worse live-action version of Baccano.
Yeah, exactly. God. So yeah, fully agree with that. What is the next one?
Funnily enough, UGG also had read more manga as a sub-tip.
A little bit.
I have to agree that, Chainsaw Man, we've both gotten a lot of mileage out of recently. If anyone wants to kind of meditate on character flaws and they're not afraid to have that in a very unsubtle deconstruction of it, check out the manga Madaka Box. It is a slice of life rom-com turned shonen battle manga that goes back to being a rom-com, and then it ultimately becomes a deconstruction of all of those things. And the whole time it's just about whether or not a person can exist without flaws, and what that person would look like, and what the nature of genius is. And it's under 200 chapters, so really if you like anything adjacent to that, there's no excuse.
But that's the thing. I would say not read more manga, just read more. Because, like any medium, there's a lot of good manga, there's a lot of bad manga.
That's why I took the opportunity to do a recommendation, rather than a just blanket sort of read more manga. Anyway, we have one from Lady Baconator.
I hate your name, Lady Baconator. Alright, what is it?
Frequently read the types of books, poems, and/or comics that you want to write. If you want to write horror novels, then read horror novels to get a good feel of the genre.
Yes. What's that fucking, that Pirates and the Adventure with Scientists
Yes, but
meme?
actually no.
Exactly, yeah.
You mean that clip that's in every shitty YouTube animator's
Just in all
repertoire?
of fucking, Just a Robot's terrible videos.
What's really funny about that is that I hear that movie has a really good female villain who's pretty well written.
I know, right? And it's Queen Victoria.
The ultimate villain, the Queen of England.
It's true. There is no Queen of
That's
England.
people say that female villains have been going downhill, but look at real life. There's so many evil women out there.
Did Queen Elizabeth pass the Mechanicus test?
I know Razzle Khan did.
Yeah, the Versace Bedouin. All right. So, yeah, the thing is, up to a point, yes, but also no. Because I was literally saying this to Gus the other day. I think at a certain point, if you read too much of the stuff that you want your thing to be like, it just becomes an incestuous parody. You need to be looking at other stuff and bringing things in from other things, or ultimately you're not going to have anything interesting or new to say. And ironically, saying horror, I think horror has a huge problem with this. Like, almost all of the best and most innovative horror stuff coming out at the moment, have you noticed a lot of it hasn't come from traditionally horror people? Like, Jordan Peele shook the horror world with his movies, traditionally a comedy guy. Fucking Barbarian was made by one of the whitest kids you know guys. Like, I think ultimately you actually get some of the most interesting stuff from outside the space. So yeah, do some reading, but frankly, I think if you limit it too much, you're just gonna make your stuff more inaccessible to normal people and more kind of, oh, this again, to people who are experienced in the genre.
For me, I'd say definitely read enough of the thing in order to understand it, so you know that you are not being treading ground that's already been tread. Like, if you're, for example, you're gonna do something about giant robots, I guess, you probably want to watch Evangelion and a Gundam series or two, just so you know kind of what the baseline is. But then go watch a bunch of American 2000s comedies, go watch a bunch of slasher movies, go watch a bunch of rom-coms and see what happens to your writing. Don't only consume things that are similar to the thing you want to make, but do enough so that you're not under the illusion that nobody's ever done it before. Humble yourself.
I think that's a good balance, because yeah, I think people who just only consume one type of media tend to produce tremendously sterile work. And I think, like you said, the best thing you can do in exploring genres is just know what things are overdone, just so you don't do that.
Oh, one thing that's it's kind of hyper specific, but you'll see what I mean. If there's a director who is making something in the genre you like, and I say director because I mostly, write in sort of film and in dialogue and in script formats, and thus, movies are a lot of my inspiration. If there's a director who has created something in the genre that you're going for, but has works outside of that genre, also look at their other stuff, because you can see how those sensibilities carry over to a completely different aesthetic, genre, story, what have you.
All right, what is the final tip?
So, our final tip for the day is one that we've touched on before, but I think it is spicy, and I think we are in the right place to discuss it now. Granted, we have our limitations, but I think that it would be a good place to end this off on.
Already?
From Anton Bastard.
He certainly is.
As a black person myself, my tip for writing minority characters is making sure that your character is inoffensive should not be the first priority when writing them. Mind that avoiding harmful stereotypes is important. However, treating your character like a list of things to avoid usually leaves them bland and unrecognizable to the community you are trying to represent. What should come first is making your character relatable/enjoyable to the minority group and having that character be an active part of the story. When you use sensitivity readers, don't just utilize them to wash away your mistakes, but rather ask them what they find good about the character and discuss ways of enhancing that character's cultural presence.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool tip, and the thing is, I'm not qualified to get deep into the minority elements of it, but I think what I'd add in a general sense as someone just coming at it from a writing angle, regardless of your character's race, gender, sexuality, whatever. If literally any character, your main priority is how can I smooth down every edge and not how can I make them interesting, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because ultimately, that should be question one for any character. Are they interesting?
Yeah, and I just think, also as a side note, like, stereotypes never really aspirational. Like, you don't need the fucking, like, grizzled cop 2 days from retirement. You don't need the, like, uninhibited broad who's, having trouble with her husband, so goes to a private eye to get him killed. Like, I realize that was all very, like, contained into one particular genre, but some people like to use or like to imply that stereotypes and traditional archetypes are better because they're recognizable. They create a shared language and shorthand, and I do not think that's true. I think people are more compelled by unique individuals, by characters who act seemingly on their own agency rather than the imitation of characters like them in the past. And in, crime dramas and anime and rom-coms, a lot of genres have real problems with this, where it's just like a person just is what they are. And I think, considering that there is a systemic aspect to minorities being depicted, that should be especially avoided if it's not a group you fall into and you are essentially compressing a huge swath of the people who live on this earth into a couple things that some comedians in the 50s said about them.
And that's the thing. I'd say my final tip for the episode is just in regards to representation, what Meg calls the two people rule, where a great way of like avoiding stereotyping issues is to simply, rather than simply having like one character who represents the entirety of a minority group, have multiple interesting, unique characters who come from group Y or group X. Like, say, like Anton was saying, rather than just having one black character who you're then like, how will they come across? Because this is the only black person in my work and is thus the representation for how this work feels about black people. Simply include more black people and have each one be an interesting, unique character in their own right, showing that you in this narrative does not, in fact, believe that whatever group is simply a monolith.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that was so, kind of worthy of, feminist analysis when Mad Max Fury Road came out. Great movie on its own merits, by the way. One of the best movies, of the past decade. But the fact that, the women in it were all incredibly distinctive with their own strengths, weaknesses. There is, the one who's, known as, Cheeto the Frail or something. She's the wife who is very much a damsel, very much doesn't understand the ramifications of the situation, wants to go back to the bad guy, be forgiven. And if she was the only one, that would be, that would fall into a lot of harmful stereotypes that have been perpetuated throughout a lot of film. But because there are multiple, and you get the contrast of, oh, that's how Cheeto is versus that's how women are. You get, a contrast of a bunch of different people. And that's how it should be in general. And I think the best advice that we can send you off with is just know more people, be willing to write about more different types of people, and never, never, never fall for broad generalizations about the world and about the people who inhabit it. Because those things will only inhibit you as a writer and as a person.
Completely true.
So that's why we've opened up the forum to all of you people out there, learning something from you guys, but also maybe, being very, very mean to you. We love you guys.
You deserve it.
That's why we're allowed to be that. Yeah, you deserve every mean word that comes out of our mouths and every nice word, whenever
You're
that will
bad
be.
people. You should feel bad.
Yeah, we hate you.
Fuck
we
off.
hate you. Please subscribe to the channel. Oh, man. Until next time, and there will be a next time, we will do more of these. There are more Twitter tips to get through, and I've curated a bunch of YouTube writing advice already.
Which will probably be even worse.
And some of them, if you leave ones from this video down in the comments, maybe they'll be in one of these eventually. Who knows? Until next time, we'll be seeing you in the near future.